Hey everybody, and welcome to this week's garden video. This week was really two big projects, some planting and picking out of some seedlings, and then actually installing the irrigation that I've been talking about for so long. I finally got around and did it. But what I'm starting this video with, it's actually going to go in a linear order of what happened during the week. And my beets had started emerging, my seedlings had started emerging, and so I decided to pick them out on Monday and get them going in a separate tray. Now, I actually pick them out before they even have true leaves, when they're very, very, very small, because I feel like I have very good success with that. A lot of people wait till they're longer, or wait till they're older, more mature, have a more developed root system before they go in and do anything. But like I said, I've had good success the moment they emerge, picking them out, not disturbing that root, and getting them resettled. The other thing I did this week was I planted some more seeds, some more starts. I did some cauliflower and kale, which you see me doing here, and I got them on the hot tray to get them germinated. They probably don't need it because they'll germinate in cooler temperatures, and they're in a non-heated greenhouse. So there's probably enough warmth during the day, but I want to make sure that overnight it's not getting too cold because we're getting into freezing temperatures overnight. So anyway, here's a little video of me putting together and starting some cauliflower and kale. The other major project that I did this week, oh my gosh, this took me so many days, and you're going to see this kind of more or less for the rest of the video, was doing this irrigation system. Now, I designed, if you want to call it that, this irrigation system. I wanted to do something that wasn't specifically irrigation. I wanted to do something that was more malleable and something that made sense to me. I wanted it to be drip. I didn't want it to be overhead. And I thought it was going to be pretty simple. I thought it was going to be pretty straightforward. So what I ended up doing was buying soaker hose, 250 feet of soaker hose, and a garden hose, and little connectors that were going to allow me to connect the soaker hose to the garden hose, and then I'd just turn on the garden hose and, soak all of my vegetables at one time. A very water efficient, effective way at getting down on the roots. And what I first realized when I started pulling this together is I struggled so hard with the soaker hose. It didn't just unwind, it kind of wrapped around itself. And unlike a garden hose that you can kind of slide your hand across, if you tried to slide your hand across the soaker hose, because it was rubber, like the actual rubber, not like coated rubber, it stuck to your hand and almost kind of gave you a rope burn kind of feel. So it was very difficult, and it was cold. I thought it was going to be sunny this day, and so when I'm out there playing with these hoses, I thought it was going to be warm and sunny, so they'd kind of relax and let me work with them. That was not what happened. But in any case, I finally, after a day of struggling, did get everything kind of laid out. Now, what I'm also going to show you here is sort of some of the connections that I made. And I bought these, I guess they're end caps. I'm not exactly sure what they're called, but they go at the end of a hose. And what you do is you slide this sort of, I don't want to call it a ring, but you slide this thing over the hose, and then there's a stopper that goes inside the hose, and then you push that in the stopper so it's now stopped from the inside and kind of had this connector around the outside. And then when you start tightening it, when you screw it together, it actually has a threaded section. So the threaded section holds that stopper in nice and tight, and it keeps any water from coming out the end of the hose. So that was my solution for all of the ends of these soaker hoses. I started initially digging little troughs for this because I'm going to bury them a little bit. I know people say don't bury soaker hoses. I'm only going to bury them a little bit. I'm not going to compact them. But then I decided, actually, before I do that, I'm going to have to test out the system to make sure it even works, because I was kind of getting ahead of myself. And I apologize for the cinematography. This isn't great. I didn't set the camera up that great. But what you see me here doing is kind of making my first cut and kind of establishing my first attempt at putting the system together. So I had ordered these T connectors that are the size, the internal diameter of the hose on either end, and then teeing off of them is a smaller section that'll go to my soaker hose. And so here you see me putting together and kind of fitting together the first section. So once it was set up, I thought this looks good. The hose fits tight. This is going to be nice. And then I turned it on because I thought I'm going to test it, and I had major failure. Although water was going down the soaker hose, it didn't actually work. So I needed to solve a problem. I needed to figure out a problem to solve that. But in the meantime, until I was going to go get some clamps to clamp around the hoses, I thought I will eventually bury these soaker hoses in the ground. So why don't I just kind of dig the troughs, kind of get them ready to go. I decided to dig little troughs because it was a little easier for me. I thought it would also help lay out the hoses. So the next day I came out and dug these troughs and kind of set the soaker hoses in them without covering them up. I did have to dig around plants a little bit because some of the plants are in my garden, but overall it worked well. I also, a couple days later from when I did this the first time, and this may look like, well, why are you showing me, picking these out again? But my beets, I gave them a couple days just sitting in the greenhouse to get a little sturdier, get a little bigger, and then I decided, okay, I'm going to do a whole nother tray of them. So I did pick out the beets as they were emerging and got them established in their own seed trays and seed cells. A lot of people plant beets 2 or 3 at a time per cell, and that's completely doable. People do that, but I like a large beet versus some of the smaller ones, and I have found that when I plant them 3 together, they just don't grow very big. They compete too much. So I like having individual beets. So midweek, I did decide to take the other beets that I had started and kind of divide them out. So it's 1, and there's a couple that have 2 and a couple that have 3, but mostly it's 1 beet per cell. I also took the time, because I know that with peas, I don't like to leave certain plants like peas and beans in these seedling cells for very long because they do develop tap roots and deep roots, and I don't want them to kind of get messed up by being in these shallow cells. So I took the time to plant them out this week. I know it's early for peas, but I also thought, well, they're emerging. I'm going to stick them in the ground. Let's see what they can do. They are cold tolerant. So you see me sort of, again, bad cinematography. I apologize. It is very hard to hold a camera and film yourself doing things, but planting these seedlings out, and then I decided to set the tray down. And what you'll see is kind of funny. I'm putting them along this fence that they're going to grow up, but also I have not yet figured out my irrigation system, so you've got the trough with the soaker hose sitting in it that I'm also trying to gingerly avoid as I'm putting those in there. I realized I didn't get any footage of the actual solution I came up with along this garden hose, but I ended up going out and buying some clamps, some metal clamps that screw down and tighten around the hose, or a hose clamp, to see if this would actually solve the problem of leaking. Didn't get any close-ups, but here you see me just going down the length of the hose. I have the hose running down the length of the garden bed, and I have all of the soaker hose teeing off and going down the beds. And what I did is I ended up going down and putting the clamps around and clamping them around. I had brought out my hairdryer, and you'll see me this a little bit later. Initially, I did it where I clamped things down, kind of got everything ready, and I was going to leave it in the sun to get warm because I felt like it would be better if the hose was warm before I clamped it down, just to kind of create a tighter seal. Because, garden hose itself doesn't actually, it's not very malleable. But I ended up, the clouds came in, so I ended up having my hairdryer out there with me, and I ended up using the hairdryer to heat up the hose before I clamped it down. Just, again, I wanted to make sure it had a really good seal, and this garden hose actually had a little rib running down the middle of it on the inside that was actually preventing it from creating a really flush seal, so I thought the more flexible it was, the better. I also decided to kind of connect this new garden bed that I haven't fully established yet to the system so that it's ready to go too. So you see me here throwing in some soaker hose and getting that ready to go. But once everything was clamped down and tightened down and everything and put together, I turned it on and it actually worked like a charm. It kind of looks like it's dripping out near that connector point, but it's not really doing it. It's slowly leaking out where it's supposed to, doing a soaker hose. It looks great. And as it went down, it did end up getting a little less pressure the further down the hose it went. But given time, it took 2-3 minutes, but I gave it enough time and it started dripping from all the hoses. It looked really strong. It looked really great. So I was very happy with how this turned out. Fingers crossed it continues to work throughout the season. But yeah, it's dripping. It's doing its thing. And I think it'll be really effective at keeping the soil moist where the roots are, which is exactly what I'm going for. I did run into a problem where this last little bit that I put together on the new garden beds, there was no water getting to it and it wasn't working well, so I still need to figure that out. Not sure what that problem is, but I'm not so worried about that right now. The last thing I had to do with this project, which was yet another day was I had to bury the garden hose that went the full length of the bed. So you see me out there the next day digging a little trench and burying the garden hose. I also went around and filled in and covered up the soaker hose that I had put in the beds. So those are buried not very deep, a couple inches, very lightly buried in there. And again, I know people say not to bury them, but I think it'll be okay. But I went and buried them, and I'm ready for the season, I believe. So huge week of project. Doing that took multiple days, but I'm very glad that I was able to get that done. Some of them I still have sitting on top because they're not buried or it's too difficult to get them buried, but the majority of them are ready to go and start irrigating as need be. And I thought I'd just leave you this week with a little shot of my sheep running around the field. They were very happy. I don't know why they were running, but I thought it was very cute.